I'm Dan, and this is 10,000 Hours of Indie, a podcast exploring new music and delving deeper into what goes on in the background of the independent music industry. I'm a musician and passionate music lover, and I wanted to delve deeper into new music in the independent scene around the world. I also saw this as a chance to help artists connect and share their stories, so if there's someone you hear and you want to find out more about, every podcast has links in the show description. Get involved, help this community grow, follow on the 10,000 Hours of Indie socials, you can find all the links in the show description. And also feel free to email me about anything music related, 10,000indie@gmail.com. I'm open to any ideas and love listening to your promos. Emma Pollock is a Scottish singer-songwriter known for being one of the founding members of indie band The Delgados, who also founded indie label Chemical Underground. The band were nominated for the Mercury Music Prize in 2000 for their album The Great Eastern, but split in 2005. Since then, Emma has released 4 studio albums, the latest of which, Begging the Night to Take Hold, was released at the end of September and has gained a great deal of attention and airplay. I've been listening to the album almost daily since release and have finally found some time when Emma could stop for a few minutes to chat about the album. Hi, Emma. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hi. Hello.
Firstly, I want to say what a beautiful album this is. I love strings. The strings always do it for me, so that's probably why this album's edged it over your previous work.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because when we came up with the idea of doing a trio, I mean, there's only one stringed instrument in this, and it's the single cello. And I think it's testament to the arrangements and Pete Harvey, who's the player, how rich something can sound when you concentrate on not padding, but actually a melodic arrangement rather than a chordal arrangement. And I think that's the difference with the Delgados, is that we always were a sucker for strings. And it was the Great Eastern, as you mentioned there, in 2000, that really made a big difference to our understanding of where we sat musically and what we responded to, the environment that really wanted to write within. But that was really complex, multiple arrangements, and we were trying to mimic having our own kind of orchestra. Whereas this album is a wholly different thing. It's very, very few instruments. But in that space, I think very surprisingly, we managed to create something which was just as rich and as affecting because of the simplicity. I think it's the players, Graham Smiley on keys and bass and Pete Harvey on cello. And honestly, I listened to those arrangements and I'm absolutely gobsmacked at how unforgettably melodic that they are and the textures that are brought in. So yeah, it is incredible what you can do with only very few instruments.
I think you've answered the next question as well. Well, I was going to say this feels like a much more stripped back album than your previous work. Was it a conscious decision? But it obviously was. Was that right at the beginning of the process you decided that, or as you started to write some songs?
Well, when I wrote the songs, I didn't know what they were going to be, and that's always the way. I started writing in 2018, 2019, and it was then, of course, with COVID, and then we had the Delgados. We decided to get back together and do something in November of 2019. And by the time we thought we were actually going to put this into practice, COVID had hit. And so then the world stopped turning and we had to put everything on hold while we didn't really know what the future held. The songs existed in the main, even when the Delgados were doing those shows in January 23. And the last couple of years have been really difficult. And there have been bumps in the road, which prevented me from getting the album out last year. It was meant to really come out last year. But the songs were there in essence. And in 2020, in a little gap, there was an opportunity to get together at the studio when the law was changed slightly in Scotland and we were able to convene for a few days. And my goodness, those days were the richest and the most beautiful and just so wonderful. I was there with Paul, my husband, and who's worked on everything that I've really ever done. And we got into the live room of Chem 19, which is one of the other things that I'm involved with, which is our studio, which is just outside of Glasgow. And we were sitting in the live room. We had this gorgeous grand piano, which had been hired. And we had Graham, and we had Pete, and we had Paul, and I was there. And I basically started to run through the songs. Everyone had heard the demos. And we started to play the songs, and the guys just started to improvise what they were feeling and what they're responding to. it's really interesting because songs that are just existing in an iPhone demo, they can be many things. You don't even know what the time signature is sometimes when all you've done is written a demo. You don't necessarily know how full it will be. You don't know what the instruments will be that will necessarily represent the song at the end of the day. So, for example, things like Fire Inside, which is a ridiculous song in some respects, because it sounds like something that's written in a different time, and it's all piano-led with the cello coming in the background. Well, not in the background, but it was the piano that kind of leads it, and then you've got the cello that accompanies that, but it was written on guitar. And so I could play that song on guitar. It would be wholly different, but it would technically still be the same song. You don't know any of these things until if you're in a band, you do know, but when you're a solo artist, you don't know. And the great thing was that we did make a decision to have less instrumentation in this record. We did make the decision to try our very best to be disciplined and not bring everything in afterwards, because it's always tempting to do that.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we decided to stick with this instrumentation was, to be quite honest, at the beginning of 2020, when things began to turn with the virus, I was invited to play some shows with field music as support. We did maybe 4 or 5 shows. I couldn't really afford to do much more than bring out 2 musicians with me. And that was Pete and that was Graham. So what I did was, I thought, well, what are we going to play? Because we don't have the drums, we don't have a drummer. What are we going to do? And we rearranged quite a few of the songs from In Search of Harperfield and from the first 2 albums as well, so that they could be played with the trio. And it worked so well that it informed the idea of then making the next record based on that setup. And it really has worked out extraordinarily well. And it does make you think about the whole idea of what is it to be in a band compared with what is it to be a solo artist.
Does releasing a new album still hold the thrill for you it did 30 years ago with the first Delgado's album?
Oh, yeah, it really does. Yeah, there's no doubt about it, because it's your job. What I mean by that is it's not just a job. I've had my relationship with my own music tested over and over again. When the Delgados decided to split up, and we were just tired, we were very, very tired after 10 years of releasing an album every 2 years and releasing them on our own record label for the most part, and releasing many albums of other artists as well. And then the studio was there as well, and we were absolutely bust. We'd got to the point where we didn't necessarily feel the joy and the freedom and the generosity towards each other that we had 10 years previously, and we weren't really able to sustain that lifestyle. The music industry was also turning in 2005 and things were becoming harder. So we decided to split up. And at that point, 4AD, Beggars Banquet, who we'd worked with for years, asked if I might be interested in doing a solo record. And I said, well, yeah, I would love to. Financially, it was going to be harder than it ever had been. And I kind of had to ask myself, well, why am I doing it? Because am I doing it because it provided an income before, which is always an incentive itself. But how much am I doing it if I don't have that income, and how much would I be prepared to still do it when I'm not with a band, when I have to kind of find my own incentive, when all of the shouldering of the reputation lies with the single person, and I have to then think about who the session musicians would be and what it is that I want to do with them. And the answer was a resounding yes, I still want to write. And I still want to perform live, even though I find it very stressful sometimes. And I still want to be able to say to someone when I meet them, yes, I am a musician and I write and I occasionally tour. And so a lot of it does become, what is your identity as an artist? And when things really get really tough, how strongly do you still feel about that? If everything were to be stripped away, how would the art survive in your life? What would it mean in your life if you were to strip away a lot of the framework, the juggernaut that maybe a band can feel when they're in the middle of a campaign and they're expected to do a next record and then a next record. And the emptiness of the music industry in many respects now, the space that's being created by a lot of bands, a lot of artists giving up because financially it's so hard now. It does make you really, really question what it means to you individually as a person. And it is hugely important to me. And to get right back to the question that you actually asked, Yes, I still get butterflies a few days before the album comes out. I still get nervous. I still get anxiety. But this time round, I'm actually trying harder to enjoy it, not be so scared of engaging with social media, not being as scared of checking ticket sales for a tour, trying to actually engage with it, because at the end of the day, I'm really lucky to be doing it in the first place and to be able to call this my 9th album.
And because of all those feelings, I guess the level of interest and support you've had for this has been amazing. You've really, there's been a lot of airplay on Six Music. Every article has given you a 9 or 10 or 4 or 5-star rating. It's been really well received.
Yeah, I'm really, really just so appreciative of that, because you just never know. This is 9 years after the last one, right? And I am 9 years older, right? So I'm not a young artist anymore. I haven't been for a long time. And so to still be able to get a certain response and to still be able to play in front of not a huge amount of people, but a decent amount of people is a wonderful thing in itself. And it's really, really important that every now and again you check in with yourself and you say, do you know what? This is great. This is really great fun. So I'm actually trying to bring a certain sense of, instead of shying away from the things that can feel difficult, I'm trying to actually encourage myself to wholeheartedly promote, be present, and to do as much as I can for the record and the tour.
Were you surprised at because I was going to try and avoid the 9-year question, because I assume you've had that from everyone, but were you surprised at that level of reaction after such a long break? Did you think it was going to be maybe a bit more of a trickle before you got reaction to it?
I really wasn't sure. I knew that the album was quite potent in its subject matter this time. When you compare the lyrics that I've written in the past with the Delgados, they were very oblique. It was part of a band setup. And you could even say that the lyrics for the first few solo records have been quite oblique. And you would have to dig quite a bit to try and understand what on earth I was singing about. And quite often I wouldn't know what I was singing about. But with this album, it's been something of a catharsis. It's been something of a realisation of many things about life that tends to happen when you're middle-aged female and going through the menopause and perimenopause, and realising lots of things about yourself that have been in the background and make life very, very difficult. And you're only just beginning to be able to write about them and appreciate them and give them names now. So I knew that the record, because of the press release, I don't know if you've seen the press release, but the press release itself is really quite open about what a lot of the record is about. And I think that gave journalists something to write about, actually. Someone once said to me, look, Emma, if there's no story behind an album, it's going to be difficult for people to write about it, no matter what it sounds like, because everything needs context and journalists don't have much time. And if they're going to understand a record, it's really helpful to give them a framework of what has been created within. And I was quite cynical about that before, but I think it's very true now.
Do you think you can get away with not putting as much into your promotion in that respect, not putting as much of yourself in when you're younger?
You can, yeah, because one of the beauties of being younger is that you don't really know what you're doing. You can still communicate with an audience without realising what it is that you're communicating. I think one of the funny things about great journalism is that the great journalist can help a band understand what they've made when the band are not necessarily able to quite understand it themselves. There are very, very young bands out there that are creating great music, and they're writing from a place that they might not yet understand or recognise, but the journalist might listen, and with their experience of music and of art in general, they might hear something in that music that gives away a certain amount of influence that the band have clearly benefited from. And that band might be 18 or 20, and they might not be able to give a name yet to what it is that they're evoking in the record. They might not be able to understand it themselves until 10 years later. So actually, to put a record out and to have it responded to by other people also helps the artist understand what they've made.
Do you think that's something you went through when you were young and in the Delgados at the beginning?
Yeah, I'm still not really sure what on earth we made sometimes. Honestly, like, go back to the very first album, you go back to Domestique, and you hear a band that are frantically, with a very fast tempo, in some respects responding to all the music that they're listening to at the time. So you've got the chaos of pavement, you've got the melody of lots and lots of artists that existed at that time that we were listening to. I was a big pop fan, a fan of brilliant pop music. And I've always loved melody, and I've always been really, really influenced by great chord progressions and rich chord progressions. So I love classic songwriting as well as pop music. And I love a lot of great rock music. So at the end of the day, I love the power of all these things. But when the Delgados got together, we were all playing all of the time. There was less light and shades. We were all, right, everybody, go. And then, Alan would write a song, I would write a song, and we would genuinely, we would literally weld them together in the practice room. And we would have made a song that was utterly bonkers, but still hopefully quite engaging and really energetic and difficult to play live.
I guess you were products of that wonderful, rich mid-90s scene at the time, so you were given so much more freedom than bands have these days as well.
Yeah, I guess so. It's hard to say. I don't know how to characterise the decade since then, and that's partly my age. When we talk about the 60s and then the 70s and then the 80s and then the 90s, I know that I can understand how I would dress if I were to go to a fancy dress party, and understand if it was a themed night on one of those decades, I'd have half an idea of what to do. Yeah. But I don't really know what to do with the noughties and the tens and the decade we're in now, because it feels as if we are regurgitating quite a lot of what has already been. And I don't think there's as much of a cultural gap between us as parents and our children, because I think we're all listening to much the same music in some respects. Whereas when you were born in the 70s, which I was, then your parents had come from quite a different background musically than when they were born.
I think our kids are quite lucky to have the ability to just go online and find new music, which we never had. I mean, we had to spend money every time we wanted to hear something almost.
We did. But then, of course, there's a hellish frustration with streaming, though, because, my God, it's completely dismantled the industry in one fell swoop, because there's no money now. Also, there's two things. Well, there's more than two things. There's many things, but there's also this endless, feels like infinite choice, as you say. What do you do with that? I mean, really, what do you do with that? Because when I was a student, I would take my 10, 15 quid and I would go down to FOP. I would go to HMV. I would go to any number of shops. And I would very carefully choose the album that I was going to buy that month, because I probably wasn't going to buy more than one or two records in a month. And I would probably buy it in cassette at the time, because I was listening to a lot of cassettes. I don't think I even had a record player. And then I would bring it home and, oh my God, that choice that I'd made, that record would become the only thing I played for probably a good 2 weeks, maybe more. And I would get to know it so well that I could run not just the songs in my head, but also the end of one song into the beginning of the next, because everything was in sequence, and that was the way that the album was intended to be heard. I do wonder now about the psychology of infinite freedom, because you are not necessarily going to choose new music now. You're also given the option to listen to anything that has already been out for 20, 30 more years. And that makes it more difficult for new music to even find an audience in some respects. The long tail of what was before deleted catalogue, because there wasn't enough of an audience to justify spending a few thousand quid on making 1,000 pieces of vinyl or CDs. Now those records are available to be heard, which is a great thing in its own right. But it also means that there's now an absolutely enormous amount of music to choose from. And I wonder what that means. Are we mostly listening to music that we already know, or are we actually listening to music that we don't know? And I think it would be interesting to work that one out.
When I speak to a lot of bands, and you'll hear from the last question how I get to this, I do find an increasing amount of bands not being able to answer what new music are you listening to? They are listening to stuff that's influenced them from their childhood. So I do understand that mentality. Yeah. Whereas I'm always desperate to hear the next thing. I want to hear, I love crossover albums, especially when something's melded that hasn't been done before. And I love hearing something not completely new, because there is nothing, I don't think, that is completely new anymore. not until the invention of a new instrument, maybe. But obviously, I'm always seeking to push the boundaries of what I hear. I want to hear something that I haven't heard before, at least.
I mean, I have been listening to quite a lot of new music recently, actually. I'm on Tidal, but I also try to buy some records, but I can't buy them all. I'm a really big fan of Hooray for the Riff Raff. I've been listening to The Past is Still Alive, which I think came out last year. I recently discovered a woman called Mary Timoney, who has been around. She's about the same age as me. She used to be in a band called White Flag. Her new album, Untamed the Tiger, came out last year. Is absolutely brilliant, I think. One of the best records I've heard in recent times has been, I mean, it's not a new record anymore, but I really loved the new Angel Olsen record called Big Time. It's a great record. I mean, honestly, I loved All Mirrors. I thought that was wonderful. This is more country. It's kind of raw. Being an artist, I have a complicated relationship with music because when I feel down about it, I don't want to listen to anyone else's music because I feel angry or embarrassed or frustrated that I maybe haven't put out my own music for ages. And that certainly did happen in this gap. I struggled to write because I fell out with music for a while. And that happens, I think, when you're an artist because your relationship is so complicated with it. It is something that you love, love, love dearly, but it can also hurt you because you love, love, love it. And it means so much to you that you can feel almost angry with an artist that has made something so utterly beautiful that they make you feel that you'll never be able to do that. And so there can, I mean, this is me being really honest, you can almost feel like an insane kind of envy or jealousy sometimes when another artist is, you know, garnering the plaudits and you're thinking, I'll never be in that position ever again. You can become vulnerable to that. You can become a pain in the arse. You know, you can become the narcissist again when you haven't had your own success for a while because as an artist, we need to communicate. As an artist, we need to feel that we're part of the mix that is on out there. We want to be part of the public appreciation of music. And it's lovely to be in that space right now. I know that I will need to work hard to try and keep up some kind of momentum and not fall back into some kind of malaise, you know, in 6 months' time. So I'm going to try really hard to not let that happen.
Maybe less than 9 years till the next album then.
Well, yeah, because then I'll be approaching retirement and I might not be able to get on stage anymore. Who knows? I don't know.
Moving on to the video for Future Tree, which I found on YouTube. Wonderfully simple snippets of countryside from Scotland, Norway and Sweden, and almost an alternative lyric video. What gave you that idea?
Do you know something? I made it myself and I'm actually so, and it might be obvious, right? It might be pretty damn obvious I made it myself. I'd never made a video before. And the music industry has now changed to such an extent that it is now becoming utterly essential that artists are able to make things where they maybe can't afford to ask someone else to do them. Now, you compare this situation to the mid-90s when the Delgados were making videos, and God knows how much the budget was because we weren't paying for it. We never footed the bill. We did foot the bill in the background because it would be credited to our account, or debited to our account if I was being technically correct about it. But we certainly would never have been made aware of the amount of work and the expense that went behind that. Now, 30 years on, we're now in a position where artists have got access to video making equipment, the iPhone or the phone. And I was really, really lucky to know that I was going to be driving to Norway with my son and his girlfriend. And I just set up my phone on the way and I took the footage that you saw. And I love transport. I'm a really, really big fan of all methods of moving from one place to another. And so I decided to just try and capture as much of that travelogue as possible, but whilst also being quite playful with animation. And I soon realised it was not going to be enough to basically show people what it was like to be in a van driving to Norway. I was never going to fly for longer than 20 seconds, right? So I realised that, oh my God, there's got to be much, much more to this. And that's when I happened upon the wonderful options that are available when you use certain software that allow you to pull out certain ideas and animation. And so I'm not entirely sure if I do another video, it will have to be different. I don't know what that will be yet if I do one, but it was lovely to do that. And I'm so pleased that I did make the effort because it took quite a lot of hours.
Obviously, you were in a successful band before becoming a solo artist. How scary was it going solo and releasing that first solo record?
Oh, it was very, 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 very terrifying because, frankly, I had come out of a band that were still playing pretty big venues by the time that, I think La Scala was the last venue that we played in London. And we were still doing pretty good business, I suppose, as a band. Our fan base really did love us. And we were really fortunate to be able to tour as much as we did around, the UK, Europe and America. And then we eventually managed to get to Japan and Australia. And these are unforgettable memories. And I'm really, really delighted that we could do these things. So if you imagine, suddenly that band dissolves because we were all couldn't really do it anymore. And I get the solo deal with 4AD and I'm suddenly thinking, oh my God, this could go really well. And there were other examples of Scottish artists who were doing really well at the time. And I think Beggars really, really wanted it to do really well because because they're a record company. But it didn't really do what they had wanted it to. It wasn't reviewed brilliantly. And I think the problem was that record, I didn't know who I was at that point. I had written songs while still being in the Delgados that were then recorded by musicians who were not the Delgados, produced by a producer, Victor Van Voot, who was maybe, I don't think, was necessarily as inventive a fit for me as an artist, the artist that I wanted to be. I don't think I knew who I was. I don't think he knew what to necessarily do with me. And from a stylistic point of view, honest to God, I was getting sent on photo shoots with stylists. And one day we went to Selfridges. I had a budget of £1,000 to spend on clothing. And it was one of the least enjoyable days of being in that business because I was meant to be having a wonderful time. And I now recognise, looking back on it, that none of us were enjoying it. The stylist wasn't enjoying it because I didn't know what I wanted to look like. The answer to that really is I just wanted to be me, but I didn't even know what that was at that time. And there was all this expectation, and the record company wanted me to be something of a characterful female artist that I just didn't really know how to do that because I was still trying to work out what the difference was from being in a band to being a solo artist. And I just think we ended up putting out a fairly lackluster record that wasn't as unique or as individual as any of us wanted it to be. I mean, I'm proud of it, but I think it was compromised.
So 2 years ago, the Delgados got back on stage together.
Yeah.
How was it?
That's complicated.
Did it still feel like the old days, or was
No. We were nervous as hell. 5 shows in the UK isn't enough to get over the hurdle of we haven't done this for 18 years.
Yeah.
There was so much stress involved with perfection, I think. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I loved playing those shows, but I didn't necessarily love the stress that was around them. I was doing a huge amount of the work myself, and I think we could have done with more support. I think we probably could have done with a manager at the time. I think, unfortunately, when you come from a legacy of DIY music, setting up your own record company, managing yourself for most of the time, and being expected to be able to go from no social media when we were together the first time to creating every account under the sun that we thought we needed and doing it all within 12 months of actually announcing we were doing these shows. It felt like we were running to catch up. It was stressful. The positives were being with the guys again in the same room. That was lovely. We got on better. We were far, far, far more. We're better to each other, kinder to each other. We weren't being dicks, which we certainly were at points when the band were together because it's a family. I've been in a band. It's like being in a family. The festivals were really stressful. There was so much to be done. Again, we could have done with more help, I think. And I'm not sure I was able to really feel like I did in the olden days, which was, yay, I'm here to just play. I felt like there was so much more to be done. And I think that's partly an age thing. But suddenly you're older. The whole point is not just to have a drink and play the show anymore. There's so much more going on around about you. I loved it to a point, and then I think it was actually quite challenging.
Is that it now? Will you consider doing it again, or was that enough for you to say, nah, that's it, done now?
I don't know the answer to that. I wouldn't want to say either way right now. I would leave it completely open. It's not just to do with me.
Yeah, of course.
There are the others. I would say it would be lovely to be slightly more flexible. I would like the band to be able to get to the States and be able to play without necessarily taking 10 musicians and crew. I don't think that would be possible. in the modern music industry.
You'd be lucky to get all 10 into the country at the moment.
Yes, we would be lucky to get all 10 into the country, yeah.
You've got a 12-date UK tour starting at the end of the week. How exciting is it for you to have the opportunity to see the reaction of the fans to the new material?
So lovely. And what I want to do this time is basically just be able to enjoy it, because honestly, artists we're really lucky. See, when people do a job and they're asked, what did you do for your job? And they might think, I don't really know, but I was very busy all the time and I kind of enjoyed it sometimes and I had shit days other times, but most of the time I just wanted to not be doing it, which unfortunately I think is probably the true response of many people. But when you're an artist, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not the only thing I do, right? I'm also running Chemical Underground with Andrew Savage, who's my brother-in-law. I'm also running Chem 19 Studios with Paul. I'm also doing things that everyone in life needs to do, looking out for my family, doing all those things. But these albums and those moments, those tours, they happened. And I can't remember it all because I've got a poor memory, but I know they happened. And I'm so, so appreciative and excited that I can pick up a record and say, I made this and released this back in 1996 or 98 or 2000 or 2007 or 2010. And then it carries on up until 2025. That's an amazing thing to be able to say. And I wish I didn't have the complex relationship with music that I sometimes do, which means it might take 9 years between albums. And I really, really, really hope that the next batch of songs, good God, I hope it's not going to take anywhere near the same amount of time. So I need to make a mental note to make sure that's the case. So I actually want to be really present and I want to really enjoy the company of Pete and Graham and whomever else is there with us for the tour, because we had such fun making this record. And I know that we're going to have a lot of fun performing it live. And to meet the audience afterwards, I'll be doing merch afterwards as well. It'll be so lovely to just meet people and talk to them.
I'd love to make it over there to see the show. In fact, I noticed you're playing at the Portland Arms in Cambridge.
Yes.
The worst gig I've ever played was in the Portland Arms in Cambridge.
That's really good to know.
That was purely down to me and under rehearsal. It was nothing to do with the venue.
It was nothing to do with the venue, right? Okay, good.
No, I mean, that was 23 years ago as well. I'm sure they're under different management by now. Well,
listen. I mean, I do have some control over the under-rehearsed thing, so that does remind me. I need to pull my socks up later on today and get back into that.
So after the tour, what's next? Have you got any plans to play outside the UK? I did notice there was a little snippet of you saying you might have some shows in Spain in February.
Yeah, I might have some shows in Spain. I'm yet to hear how the agent's getting on with that. I would really love to get back to Spain, because Spain has been the other country that I've been able to regularly visit as a solo artist, which has been a welcome surprise. And it's because the Delgados always did really well over there. So it's absolutely brilliant to be able to still go and so far have been able to get an audience. I don't know how things are going with the arts in Spain right now. In Europe, they tend to get more subsidy for the arts in some respects at venues. So I'm hoping that it's still possible to go over there. And we shall find out. And
maybe some festivals next summer if all goes well.
If all goes well. I mean, I don't really know yet about that, but I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to play some festivals. It's always great fun to play. Although the last time the Delgados played in the UK, every single festival was a deluge. We brought the rain with us everywhere we went. So I hope I don't do that, if indeed I do play.
Is that part of being Scottish, though?
I think it is, yeah. It doesn't matter where you go, yeah.
I went on many family holidays to Scotland when I was growing up, and my dad went, it'll start raining as soon as we cross the border.
And it did.
It did every time, yeah.
You see, the summer's a poison chalice, because you think everyone looks forward to the summer in Scotland because it's, we've just had a shit winter. And then you get to May, and May can be, oh my God, May can be brilliant. It can be gorgeous. And then you just don't know what's going to happen. It's roulette at that point.
Well, it's all right, because Scotland's on a level with Helsinki, so it's pretty similar here.
Is it really? Oh, for God's sake.
It really is. So for anyone wishing to find out more, your website is emmapollock.com, and you use Instagram, Facebook, X, Tumblr, and Bandcamp, according to your website. Are those all still correct?
I'm not using X really much anymore. for the reasons that
anyone
anyone
is.
else might not really use it. But I think, I mean, I'm on Instagram a lot at the moment and Facebook, yeah.
Yeah, I've been following your Instagram. You've kept your fans very well updated on there.
Well, good, thank you, because that would seem to be the place to go right now. It is really funny. I mean, every 10 years something collapses when it all the hard work that's been done. And of course, it's really funny to remember MySpace. And I remember being quite delighted when I was just about to go on tour to Spain, and my numbers in MySpace suddenly they really started to accelerate. And it was because the Spanish interest was pretty strong. And then, of course, that disappeared, or it was still there, but nobody really uses it anymore. And then, of course, everybody kind of went to Twitter and really invested in it. And now that's gone to shit. So Instagram's the place to go right now.
Begging the Night to Take Hold by Emma Pollock is available now through Chemical Underground. It is available physically in all the record stores in the UK, at least, and through your Bandcamp, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a shop on the website. We've got Bandcamp. We've also got traditional distribution through record stores. Yeah.
Perfect. And it is on streaming services for those who are as short of cash as I am.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for asking me on.